Happy Labor Day weekend, everyone. I'm Eric, and whether you're tuning in from the lake, the pool, a bar, the comfort of your home, or even your bed, we're glad that you're here. This is Crosspoint. Today we're continuing the At the Movie series, where we look at some of the spiritual meanings behind the year's hottest movies. And this week we're looking at the movie The Fall Guy, how to get back up when life knocks you down. So if you feel like life has knocked you down a bit, you're in the right place. And the best part about joining us during the At the Movie series is if this is your first time with us, you've got some free movie tickets coming your way. That's right, free movie tickets a day for all first-time guests, and here's how you can get them. If you scan this QR code and fill out the digital connection card, tell us about yourself. We'll drop some movie tickets in the mail for you this week as our way of simply saying thank you for joining us today. And if someone invited you, we'd love to know that too. Hey, it's Labor Day weekend, and due to the Labor Day holiday, CSM, Crosspoint Student Ministries, will not be having their meeting on Sunday, September 1st. We'll be back again Sunday, September 8th for the closing ceremonies of the Chase right here at the Crosspoint campus. Also, the Crosspoint Commons Coffee Bar will be closed on Monday, September 2nd for Labor Day, and we'll reopen Tuesday, September 3rd. So if you need a workspace outside of your home or office, or a place to connect with a friend, meet for coffee, or just grab some free Wi-Fi, we'd love to see you this week at the Commons. And last, speaking of labor and Labor Day, we'd like to thank all the workers and volunteers that make this place go every week. If that's you, we want you to know that we couldn't do any of it without you. And if you're interested in being part of the world-changing volunteer team here and helping make good things happen for other people, we'd love for you to help. Let us know at this QR code and we'll help you get connected. All right, we've got a great service for you today. Before we hear what Curt has to say, check out this trailer from this weekend's movie, The Fall Guy.
In 3, 2, 1, action. So good.
Oh, good.
Shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling. You give love a bad name.
Anyone but him. I didn't approve him. You know that. You are literally the last person on earth I want to see slap the shit out of you. I really could.
And I'm open to that in a safer environment.
You've been a ghost. No phone call, no text.
It's not like I didn't want to apologize.
You don't have to explain anything. It was just a flame. So how have you been? God, I hate that thumbs up stunt guy stuff. I'm the director.
We're gonna set this man on fire.
You're a stunt guy. We need to keep it super profesh.
Profesh is my middle name.
You said your middle name was Danger.
How'd we do, boss? Really?
Yeah.
Holster that.
Yeah, it's holstered. It's done. Forget. You never saw it.
Tom Ryder, the biggest action star on the planet, is missing. You need to bring him back. Or Jodie's movie is dead.
Why me?
You're a stuntman. Nobody's gonna notice you. That's your job. No offense.
I mean, some taken.
You find Ryder, save Jodie's film. You get the love of your life back.
I'm not the hero, I'm just the double. Not today, you're not. Tom, we only need you back on set, pal.
Dead body on ice.
He was so dead, Gail. He was super dead.
He's got himself involved with some shady people.
I had no choice. I had to do some Jason Bourne shit. They were trying to kill me. And not in a fun way. You can make it, you can make it. You can't make it. It's too dangerous. Gotta be stairs. Okay.
What happened to your face? You look terrible.
You look amazing.
You fall down, you get right back up. How far would you go for the one that you love?
I'll buy you a drink when this is over. Engage your core.
Yeah, boy. Stop.
Let's do it later. Want to go to a beach somewhere?
Drink a spicy margarita!
Make some bad decisions.
Yes!
ground. Tommy and Gina never back down. Tomorrow's getting harder, make no mistake. Look it in and look, you gotta make your own breaks. It's my life, it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live while I'm alive. It's my life, heart is like an open highway. Frankie said I did it my way. I just wanna live while I'm alive. It's my life. Better stand tall when they're calling you out. Don't bend, don't break, baby, don't back down. It's my life, it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live while I'm alive. It's my life, heart is like an open highway. Frankie said I did it my way. I just wanna live while I'm alive. It's my life, and it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live while I'm alive. Heart is like an open highway. Frankie said I did it my way. I just wanna live while I'm alive. It's my life.
Yeah, come on. Let's give it up for this band. Man, I tell you what, it's my life. That's what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about your life today. And, what do we do when we get knocked down? How do we actually get up and continue living the life that we are here on this earth for? So, super excited to have you here today. Welcome to Crosspoint. And we're excited for everybody to join us across our platforms, including those online. Let's make some noise for those at the pool, at the lake. We are jealous if you're tuning in from those places, but glad you were joining us this weekend. And for all of us here this weekend, we're going to be looking at this movie, The Fall Guy, and we're going to be kind of unpacking some of the spiritual meaning behind this movie. There's some really cool things in this movie, and I think God perhaps has something really unique for every single one of us on this. Now, my name's Curt. If we've not had a chance to meet, if you're here for the first time, welcome. As Eric said, you've got free movie tickets coming your way, so just let us know on the connection card. That's how we're going to get those to you. Let us know how we can send those to you, and you'll have those coming your way this week. All right, this movie is going to be a fun one, The Fall Guy. I grew up in the 80s, and so this was one of my favorite TV shows back in the 80s, and this movie is kind of a take off of that, and it was such a cool show because it's about this Hollywood stunt guy named Colt Seavers. Now, that's like the coolest name ever, right? Who would not, if you're a guy, like you're like, man, if I had the name Colt, that would be awesome. And so I just remember like loving his name, and as you can imagine, and even as you saw in that trailer, I mean, he's, getting blown up, he's getting set on fire, he's getting thrown out of vehicles, he's going through windows, he's getting dropped from like incredible heights, all for our entertainment. I mean, it's all a part of, his stunt role. And, there's a point in the earlier series where I believe like something happened and he felt like it was his fault, and he kind of gets out of what he's doing and he feels like he's not good anymore, and he bails on his career and bails on, the love of his life. And so in this new movie, this is kind of a comeback story. This is where Colt's back, and he's pulled back into the game, and he's got to track down a missing movie star. He's got to solve a dangerous conspiracy, and he's trying to win back the love of his life, and he's trying to keep his day job as a Hollywood stuntman all at the same time. Just a normal day, like in everybody's life, right? Like that's what your life looks like. So I think the reason that perhaps we connect with movies like this and we see this is because we know, all of us, what it's like to get knocked down. We've all been in that place, right? Where we've been knocked down. Maybe not knocked down like we saw in that trailer, maybe not knocked down like a Hollywood stuntman, but, knocked down perhaps by a parent in our younger years, or a coach or a teacher, somebody who said, hey, I just don't know that there's much of a future for you. Maybe we've been knocked down by a boss that just kind of crushed your dreams, or maybe knocked down through a broken marriage, or, some kind of brokenness in your family, maybe even broken health. I mean, just something that continues to just put you on your back. Maybe it's something that's of your own doing. Maybe it's a bad decision that has just led to some really, really bad places, a difficult path. Maybe it's just negative self-talk. Whatever it might be, we all know what it feels like to be knocked down. And so the question we're going to kind of, dig into is, what are you going to do in life when life knocks you down? Like, what do you do in those moments? Like, are you just going to stay there? Are you going to stay down? Are you going to let the problems kind of take over? The setbacks kind of set the course of your life, stay out of the game? Or are you going to, keep persevering? Are you going to get back up? Are you going to keep moving forward? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And this isn't something we just see in a movie, from Hollywood. This is actually something we see as a character trait of godly people. We actually see this all over different figures throughout the Old Testament, the New Testament. This is something that God actually can build in us, this idea of godly perseverance. And so we're going to look at what that means. And I don't know there's a better guy to talk about when we talk about what this looks like than one of my absolute favorite figures from the New Testament, a guy by the name of the Apostle Paul. In fact, I don't know there's anybody, maybe other than Jesus, in the New Testament to talk about when it comes to, somebody who faced more people who tried to knock him down, had more things knocking him down than the Apostle Paul. Every time he got knocked down, Paul got back up. He kept moving forward. And he didn't do that, for personal fame or notoriety or wealth, like we see in the movies. He actually did this because he just had this relentless desire to move through life and to continue going regardless of what came his way. And if you and I want the life that God has dreamed for us, and not let our problems put us down and not let the people around us knock us down, then we've got to develop this kind of godly character. And we see this in certain figures in the Bible. We're going to see this in Paul, and we see this in this movie, The Fall Guy. Now, the Apostle Paul, his life was filled with setbacks and problems. I mean, it's filled with it. And yet, he continues to just get back up. He never quits. In fact, one of the clearest pictures we see of this is in the book of Acts. So we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the first 4 books of the New Testament, authorized biographers of Jesus' life. And then we have this book that's like the Acts of the first Christians, the first church that was on the planet. And I want to set the scene up a bit here because Paul was not a part of that. In fact, Paul didn't grow up in a home that knew Jesus. He grew up in a very religious home, always about following the rules. It was all about rigidity and rules and making sure everybody else is following the rules. Jesus comes along, and he thinks Jesus is scandalous. They're like, this guy's coming along, and he's not following the rules. He's not doing the religious things like they're supposed to be done. And he has this thing about, our Heavenly Father wants to know us. Well, all that people knew was religion through rules. And so, Paul's not a fan. In fact, Paul actually goes against these early Christians. He's out basically arresting them. He's persecuting them. People who are followers of Jesus, he's putting them in jail. And then some of them are even dying as a result of what Paul was doing. Until one day, Paul actually encounters Jesus in a unique way. He actually experiences the personal nature of who Jesus is. And he does a 180. He repents is what we call it, which means to simply change your mind. It's where he changes his mindset about who Jesus is. And maybe even today, some of us today might even have a change of mindset on who the person of Jesus is. Who knows? But he begins to follow this person, Jesus. He says, wow, this is really who Jesus really is, the real deal. And not only does he begin to follow him, he actually begins to champion and help others follow him as well. Now, I want to show you a cool little interview. I think it's cool when we see figures from culture talk about biblical things and spiritual things. And so I want you to take a look at what Russell Brand here says about the Apostle Paul.
In the figure of Paul, I have found so much inspiration and excitement and warmth and compassion, and indeed, obviously, the first apostle or significant apostle to transform posthumous to Christ's physical life. Full on 100% committed to the persecution and destruction of Christians to become the number one. This is my deal. I'm going to spread this everywhere, day and night, or like through every possible permutation, jails, trials, shipwrecks, earthquakes, you name it, I'm into it. The book of of Acts and then, the subsequent letters, blown my mind. It's blown my mind because of the character of Paul. Sometimes I think, well, man, that's just a human being like me. I can get into that. So I've gone from thinking that I am Jesus to recognizing I need Jesus and wanting to be like Paul, wanting to live for this thing, live for it like you need a revolution, live for it like not Christianity so I can fit in with the world, but Christianity so that I can become who I am in relationship to him, that we might change the world together with humility, first humility before honor. I mean, it's raining down on me.
Oh, how cool is that? He's like, man, I went from, let's give it up for Russell. I went from thinking I was Jesus to realizing I need him to actually trying to emulate not only Jesus, but the Apostle Paul, who went through some pretty deep stuff. And so this is where we pick Paul up in this story, in fact. We're going to pick up here. He's been held in prison for 2 years. He's on a boat headed to Rome for a trial that he's about to head into. And if that's not already bad enough, he's on a boat that's headed into a storm. All right, so here's where we pick up the story. It says, when a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up the anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength, called a nor'easter. They put that in for like the Midwesterners and the New Yorkers right there, just so you know. They burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars. So for multiple days, blotting out the sun and the stars, until at last, look at this last phrase, all hope was gone. All hope was gone. I mean, so imagine you're a prisoner for 2 years. You finally get a trial. You're headed to your trial in Rome. Hurricane blows in, all right, nor'easter, if you like to think of it that way, and threatens to wreck your boat. It's wrecking your life. And so who's been in that place before? You've been in that place before, right? Something blows in, a storm blows into your life, starts wrecking your life, and you feel like all hope is gone. All right, maybe you weren't a prisoner. Maybe you weren't threatened by a storm like Paul right here, but maybe it was other storms, bankruptcy, something relationally, a divorce, maybe some kind of unexpected loss. And what keeps you going when you get knocked down in those moments? I want to help us see that there's actually something that we can draw on, that God actually gives us. He wants to grow in us, that helps us in those moments. Sometimes it's just crawling along. Sometimes all we can do is claw and just slowly make our way by faith to continue to move forward so we don't give up, persevering through the struggles, through the storms, even through the temptations. And listen, I know this is where some of us are today. Some of you are in the midst of something where you're clawing, scraping through that right now. Some of you are in the middle of a big storm right now. And others of us, you might be sitting here going, man, I don't think I have any storms in my life right now. You know what? If that's you, first of all, let me just say, you should be doing what this guy's doing right here. You should be like doing a happy dance. You should be like, all right, man, I'm going to celebrate today. And you can do that with like humility. You don't have to like let everybody know. It's just like you should be thanking God. You should be like, oh my word, I'm going to celebrate today because right now I'm not in a storm. Because all you need to do is look out the window and over the horizon, and guess what? A storm is coming, baby. A storm is coming your way, because that's what happens in life. All right, that's why we all need this topic and what this movie talks about. And we need this godly perspective on how do we grow perseverance, just like Paul did. So, how do we get back up when we get knocked down? How do we get up when life knocks us down? I want to give you 4 bank shots today, 4 ways that we can do this and we can apply to our lives. All right, here we go. Number 1, we have to realize that there will be times when life knocks me down. All right, we have to realize, hey, that's going to happen. I'm going to get knocked down. I've been listening to a podcast series recently called The Founders. Got referred to by a mentor of mine, and I just picked it up. It's got about 300 episodes, and I'm only on like 7 or 8. But I mean, it's looking at the lives of people like Elon Musk and Walt Disney and Steve Jobs and Joe Kennedy. I mean, just people who were entrepreneurs, who were founders of things. And this guy, David Senra, who does the podcast, he basically reads a biography a week, and then he summarizes that biography, and then he pulls out some of the through lines that you find in people who are founders. And one of the through lines that continues to emerge is people who found things, people who are entrepreneurs, they don't get fazed by failure. I mean, failure does nothing to them. In fact, an episode I listened to last week was on the Wizard of Menlo Park, Thomas Edison. And I want to just read for you a section of what the podcaster says. He says, what I want to talk to you about right now is about this wonderful anecdote that illustrates Thomas Edison's level of stoicism, his indifference almost to tragedy in deterring his focus on invention. And then it goes into talking about how there was this moment where Thomas Edison had a fire in his laboratories, I believe in Naples, and it just swept through all the different buildings of his different laboratories. He thought he was losing everything. They thought all of his, his phonograph and apparently recordings were being burned, all of his supplies for his laboratories. Later they found that he didn't lose everything. Some of the recordings were saved. I don't know how this happened. Over 2,000 gallons of alcohol that he used for experiments was saved, didn't burn up in the fire. Don't know how that happened. But they didn't know this at the time. He goes on, he says, but on the night of the fire, when they didn't know any of that any of that was saved, when the fire had yet to be contained and was still hopping from one building to the next, and when the prospects were the bleakest, Edison's quanimity was put to the test. He cracked jokes, he laughed, he declared, although I am over 67 years old, I'll start all over tomorrow. Nothing could rattle him. The podcaster says, I love this story. That's amazing. Imagine your life's work. At the time, you think it's burning down in front of you and laughing and saying, okay, we'll be back to work tomorrow. Man, they don't get, they get knocked down. There's something about founders, they get back up. Listen, we can learn from them. Life is full of struggles. All right, we have to persevere through the struggles. Getting knocked down is a part of the journey. In fact, Jesus, he promised this. Didn't promise it like, hey, I can't wait till it happens. Promised it in like trying to prepare us. He said, I've told you these things. So he was telling his team, he's like, hey, there's going to be some stuff that's going to happen. But don't worry, I see you, I hear you, I know what's going on. I've got you. I see what you need. He says, I've told you these things so that you may have peace in me, not like a peaceful, easy feeling peace, but like peace. And he says, here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but he says, take heart because I've overcome the world. These things are that's seemingly going to be dictating or dominating your life. Don't lose heart because I've overcome them. I'm actually putting in you something that will help you navigate them. Jesus says here, you will. He doesn't say, hey, you might have struggles. He says, no, you will. They're coming. Aren't you glad you came to church this weekend on Labor Day? Man, I'm so glad. So encouraging. No, he's just being real. He's like, you will have problems. Struggles are coming your way. So back to Paul. He knew a lot about setbacks. Let's look at another episode from his life. This is in his letter, 1 Corinthians. He says, I have worked harder, been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, faced death again and again. 5 different times, Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned, with rocks, not so just always like to clarify that. He says, 3 times I was shipwrecked. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. He goes on, he says, I've traveled on many long journeys. I faced danger from rivers and from robbers. I faced danger from my own people. I faced danger in cities, in deserts, on seas. Pretty much everywhere he goes, he faces danger. I've worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I've been hungry and thirsty and have gone without food. I've shivered in the cold without even enough clothing to keep me warm. And this guy sounds like the fall guy, right? He just sounds like the fall guy. Not shipwrecked once, not twice, but 3 times. Wow, what is Paul describing here? Well, he might be describing something similar to what you're going through right now. You might be going through something really difficult. You might be going through some kind of relational breakup right now, and it feels that way. You might be, perhaps you didn't have the money to buy your daughter the shoes when she really needed them in that season. Maybe, you just can't catch a break, with your career. We have these moments that just are devastating. What I don't want us to miss in Paul's story is he just keeps getting up. He just keeps going forward. He didn't stay down in spite of the struggles. He's got this godly perseverance. And oh yeah, by the way, at the end of that, he said, and besides all this, I have this daily burden of concern for the churches. He says, I'm also starting all these churches trying to show people God, but that's just kind of the side thing I'm doing right now. In fact, all the things he went through actually prepared him to go start these churches. Just a few short years later, he's going all around the Mediterranean rim, and he's trying to take the hope of Jesus to new communities. It's hard work, startup work, foundational work in the kingdom, sharing the hope of Jesus. And then he writes more than half of the New Testament. And so, how does he do all this? Well, it's because real success doesn't come from never getting knocked down. Real success comes from getting up when you get knocked down. So we have to realize, that's just part of life. The knockdowns are going to come. Second bank shot, we have to maintain control of our emotions when life knocks me down. This is a hard one. Now, I was on a call, I don't know, a week and a half ago with a group that I was, we've been working on an investment thing here at Crosspoint. I was having a call with somebody that we are inviting to come be a part of this with us, kind of like a affiliate ministry partner. And they had a meeting, and I was trying to get figure out like where this was and what the answer was, and I'm texting, and I get a response back and says, hey, one of our chairs will call you, or second chair will call you. And I'm like, oh, great. Second chair's calling me. That means we are getting knocked down. We're not getting accepted on this. And so I took the call later that afternoon, and before I took the call, I wrote a note to myself, because I'm like, Curt, you need to maintain control of your emotions, because sometimes I get pretty worked up and jacked up in moments like this. And so I wrote a note at the top of my page. I said, when I get into this conversation, I want to make sure there's a few things that happen right here. And so here's my notes right here. You can actually see my notes. I said, I'm going to be loving. I'm going to listen. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to say thank you. And by the way, no cussing. All right? Because I just needed to remind myself that I can drop some language to try to make a point. And so I'm like, I need to control my emotions in this, because none of that is going to be helpful in this situation. We have to maintain our emotions. It's one of the ways that we actually are able to get back up. We talked about this last weekend, in fact. We looked at Inside Out 2 and how to deal with how I feel. And if you missed it, you can go back and check out last week's service. It's online. And, we have to trust God with our emotions. And we have to prepare emotionally. For me, I have to go into conversations sometimes. I have to say, okay, what's the spirit that I want to convey here? Sometimes I got to use, more intensity. Sometimes I need to back off. And so, I have to say, when the pressure rises, how do I stay in control of my emotions? Because that's part of what allows us to move forward. So back to Paul right here. They're all caught up in this storm. He's got a boat full of passengers. Everybody's starting to panic. Here's what happens. It says, finally, Paul called the crew together. He said, men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. All right, I love this. It's probably what I would have said. I'd been like, dude, you guys screwed yourselves over right here. You should have paid attention. You made the wrong decision here. But that's not actually what Paul does right here. He goes on. He says, you would have avoided all this damage and loss, but take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said. So how did Paul remain calm in this moment? They're in the middle of a storm. They got this hurricane-force wind coming, a nor'easter. They got this impending shipwreck that's about ready to happen. But look what he says right here. Here's how he does it. He says, I believe God. I actually have a high level of belief right here. I have a high level of trust. He trusted. He actually said, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to trust God's promises. I got an email with a little quote in it this week from a guy named Ethan. I don't think he's the originator of it, but I'll give him credit for this. But this really blew me out of the water, this little phrase. He said, trust is the purest form of worship. Trust is the purest form of worship. Paul remained calm in that moment because he trusted. He actually leaned on his belief and leaned on God's trustworthiness. So another cool article this week. You may have seen this. It's football season, so a lot of football stuff. This was on Justin Herbert. Apparently last weekend, he and like 11 of his players and personnel were caught in an elevator before their third preseason game against Dallas. And no air conditioning. They're in there for over 2 hours. And the article was that he was a rock. In fact, I love what his coach said right here. Jim Harbaugh is his new coach. He said, you get in those situations and it's a test of will, as Harbaugh said. You're challenged, it was a test of will, and you pull it down or pull it in. And then he goes on, he says, the group was trapped without air conditioning for 2 hours before being rescued by Dallas Fire Rescue, dripping in sweat when they were removed through one of the ceiling panels. Harbaugh said, every person except Herbert, that is. Check this out. Justin Herbert, his hair was a little wet, but his shirt was completely dry. He said, that was another thing that blew me away. The guy is just a beast. So everybody's freaking out. It's hot. What's he doing? He's staying calm. He's controlling his emotions. It allows, when devastation, when tragedy hits, when something doesn't go the way we plan, it allows us to actually move forward. Amazing. This is what Paul did. He didn't panic. In fact, he paused. He prayed. He didn't respond to the fear. He actually responded with belief, with trust. And that calmness was actually contagious, spread to everyone on that ship. Which kind of reminds me of a question that we ask this question often around here, but it's a good question right here, that I think all of us have to ask ourselves when we're navigating difficult seasons, we're getting knocked down. We have to ask ourselves, how would your life be different today if you truly believe that God sees you, he hears you, and he can and will provide for everything you need? That he can and he will provide for everything you need. See, Paul in this moment, he leans into that belief right there. The thing that allows him to get up is he's like, I know God sees and knows what I'm going through. I know he sees it, which leads to the next step. Next step is we have to resist the temptation to quit. We have to resist the temptation to quit. This is so hard. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't moments or things or relationships or, jobs that come to an end. There are necessary endings for things. In fact, a great book, by the way, if you want to understand that better, by Henry Cloud, called Necessary Endings. He talks about it. He says, getting to the next level always requires ending something, leaving it behind, moving on. Growth demands that we move on. So, when we think about, never quitting, it's not about never, bringing something to an end or having an appropriate ending or, putting certain things aside so I can add something else. No, this is about resisting the temptation to quit in the middle of something right here. In fact, we have a phrase in our home that, whenever we're in the middle of something, that's never a time to quit. Our kids will come and say, hey, I'm not sure I want to keep doing this. If you're in the middle of a sports season or in the middle of a test or in the middle of a project or a job, and things are hard, in the middle is not the time to quit. We say, that's the time that you persevere. This is the time you grow. There's a time to evaluate if this is something that has a necessary ending, but it's never in the middle. But it's so tempting to quit things. We're in the middle of the storm. See, Paul, he faced the same kind of moment right here. All right, he's a prisoner. He's caught on a boat in a storm. He's got a huge shipwreck that's about to happen. He's been on a couple already. And yet they make it to the island alive. And this is what's crazy. Paul survives all these harrowing experiences right here. He's soaked, he's cold, all right? He's stuck out in these waters. You'd think that you're like, okay, Paul should have a good turn of fortune right here. Yeah, not yet. All right, take a look at what happens next. It says, as Paul gathered an armful of sticks, he's laying them on the fire, and a poisonous snake, driven out by the heat, bit him on the hand. All right, you're like, seriously, all right? So the dude, all right, so he survives the shipwreck, all right, not once, twice, 3 times, all right? He's been beaten, flogged with sticks, with all kinds of things, and he's going to be taken out by a snake while he's building a fire, really? Like a very benign thing? And yet not so fast. Take a look at what it says next. But Paul shook off the snake, it says, into the fire, and he was unharmed. This is crazy. They all saw it. Like, holy cow, Paul, another thing's happening to Paul right here. They're waiting for him to keel over. They're waiting for him to just stay down. This one's going to knock him down. But what does Paul do? He shakes it off. It says he shook off the snake right here. This is what the Fall Guy does in the movie. Every time he's knocked down, guess what? He shakes it off. He gets up. He keeps going. You probably know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's going to be times where you are going to face a virtual parade of bad news. I mean, it's just a part of life. There's going to be moments that you just feel like, okay, am I going to catch a break? All right, and you have to decide in those moments, am I going to shake this off? Like Paul, or am I going to throw in the towel? I think one of Paul's most endearing qualities that we see right here is he learns lessons in the midst of the trials. This is how God helps him to overcome. This is how God develops this godly perseverance. And this is so important because, we have this idea that just because we're going through something that we're going to learn something, but that's not true. In fact, the reality is just because you go through something doesn't mean you're growing through it. All right, you can go through something and never grow through it. So we have to say, okay, as I'm going through this, am I actually growing through it, or am I just trying to make it through? All right, and so as you think about whatever struggle you might be in right now, whatever problem, and again, if you don't have a struggle right now, man, do a happy dance, right? Just pause and say, oh my gosh, God, I'm so thankful I'm in a good day, good place right now. But as you think about whatever struggle for the rest of us, all right, your greatest moments may be on the other side of that, but we have to learn through it. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to understand not all problems are equal. In fact, I want to give you kind of a filter on how to level our problems, right? Because this is really helpful. It's helpful for me in terms of how do I evaluate my problems? Because like I had a problem this week where my Culver's order got jacked up and we didn't get some of what we ordered, and it kind of made me mad because I paid for it. But that's different than finding out you have cancer, right? But those are both problems. So how do we level our problems? Let's take a look at this. I want you to think of it like buckets, all right? Leveling our problems. The first one, we're going to call this level 1 problems. All right, these are problems that don't seem that bad. All right, so these are problems that are minor. All right, so these are problems like the sales pitch didn't go the way I hoped. I didn't get the sale, but like I still have my job. All right, so like I maybe lost a little income, but I didn't lose my job. Or as a student, I got a C on a test. I really wanted an A. That's a problem. It's a minor problem. Missing the flight. I pulled away from Starbucks. Didn't get my oat milk or my extra pump of pumpkin spice syrup. I mean, that's a problem. Paid for it. Got really expensive. Like those are problems, but those are minor problems, right? And so those are level 1 problems. They're not fun. But you learn lessons in dealing with level 1 problems that actually prepare you for level 2 problems. So what are level 2 problems? Level 2 problems are difficult problems. All right, this is where perhaps you default on something financially. Or this is where you're like, okay, my marriage is struggling a bit. We're in some hot water. All right, or this is when you realize, okay, I'm on my last stand with my boss. All right, I'm on the verge of losing this. And so these problems are difficult. They require more grit, but again, they're not the worst problems that you could face. So then we get to level 3 problems. Level 3 problems, these are intense problems. All right, and so these are where perhaps you do file for bankruptcy, or where you do a trial separation with your spouse because you realize, we've got to do something pretty intense. And so these are higher level, and there's higher stakes right here. But then there's even a deeper level, more intense level, and this is level 4 problems. And this is what I'd call devastating problems. All right, this is where you're in the midst of the messy divorce. This is where you lose a child. Nobody ever plans to lose a child. This is finding out you have stage 4 cancer. So how do you get through, level 1 and 2, you're like, okay, I know how to navigate. How do you get through 3 and 4, the intense and the difficult? Well, here's how. You grow your trust and you say, okay, I'm not just going to go through level 1 or go through level 2. I'm actually going to grow through level 1. I'm going to grow as I go through level 2 problems. I'm going to grow as I go through level 3 problems. Because see, level 2 problems prepare you for level 3. Level 3 problems prepare you for level 4. But that only happens when you don't just go through it, but you actually grow through it. If I had conversations like this, I have conversations with my kids. I'm like, listen, this thing you're going through seems like the end of the world. It's big at the moment. It's a big problem. But, you're going to grow through this. You're going to look back at this sometime. And you have the opportunity to either go through it, just try to be like, I just want to get through, never think about it again, or you can grow in this season right here. Because, see, that's what prepares you for the level 3 and the level 4s. And it's easy. Otherwise, it's easy to give up. And so I just want to encourage you to do what Paul did. You shake it off. You learn the lessons. Right? As you move through these, you say, okay, these storms are going to make me stronger when the next level comes. And that's how God develops our perseverance. And then number 4, we can actually rely on God's power to get up when life knocks you down. See, so many times we think we got to do it all ourselves. And it gets celebrated, right? We see movies like this, and we're like, oh, man, that's a self-made guy right there, the fall guy. He's got everything he needs. He just gets knocked down. He gets back up. That's Hollywood right there, right? That makes for a great story. But that is not how life works. When you go through a shipwreck, when you go through a storm, your power is limited. Let's be honest. You might be able to pick yourself up for a bit, right? There may be certain things you're like, okay, I have enough, gumption and grit to get through this, but eventually your power is going to run out. And so, we have to say, okay, my power is limited, but how do I lean into and actually rely on God's power, right? Because his power never runs out. And this is where we find the Apostle Paul right here. His power just seems to never run out. In fact, I want to show you another reflection from the Apostle Paul here on times where he was enduring some pretty difficult stuff. Here's what he says. He says, we were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. You might be like identifying with that very thing. You might be, man, that's where I am right now. We thought we would never live through it. You might identify with that, saying, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. In fact, we expected to die. But as a result, we stopped, look at what he says, relying on ourselves, and we learned to rely only on God who raises the dead. Meaning the same power that's at work in that lifeless, formless body that was lying in a grave on that early Easter morning, what we now know as Easter, that same power that brought that body back to life, that blew spirit and breath into that body, that same spirit is actually available to be alive and at work in you. You know, when you see movies like The Fall Guy, it almost feels a little Pollyannish. Like, man, the dude just keeps getting up. I mean, he gets knocked down, he gets back up, he gets knocked down, he gets back up. But that's a movie, all right? You and I can't do that on our own power. But here's a guy, Paul, who traveled the Mediterranean rim in boats you and I would never have stepped foot in. He gets beat up, stoned, snake-bitten, shipwrecked, not once, not twice, 3 times. You go on and on. He plants in all these churches around the Mediterranean rim because he wants to help people who are outside the spiritual circles, who are far from God, find a way into relationship with God. And yet, you and I are here because of what happened back then. And yet, it's not because of what he thought or even what he wrote down or even what he did. It's because of who he relied on. And it wasn't his strength that actually helped him get back up. It was God's strength. And then he tells us his little secret right here. He tells us, he says, here's my secret. He says, I take pleasure in my weakness. Think about that. I take pleasure in my weakness. I take pleasure in my insults, in the hardships, in the persecutions, and the troubles that I suffer for Christ. You're like, what do you mean, Paul? You take pleasure in this. And then here's the secret right here. He says, for when I am weak, he says, then I'm strong. He says, when I get to the place where I've done all I can do and I recognize, okay, I'm at the end of my power and I've got to rely on God's power. He's like, that's the moment where God does his greatest work. Perhaps that's the biggest move that we can make today. Maybe that's a move you need to make today, is to just acknowledge, you know what, man, I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me for every setback I'm facing. I don't have it in me for every obstacle, for every shipwreck. I mean, my power is about to run out. In fact, that's one of our next steps this weekend. If you're, got your connection card at home in front of you on your device, or you got the physical one. I mean, one of our next steps is, this week I'm going to rely on God's power to bring me through my current challenges. I just want to ask you, would you consider doing that this week? Just saying, okay, God, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm getting up. I've been knocked down. I'm gonna look more to you to help me in this. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And that's not a sign of weakness right there, by the way. That's actually some spiritual strength. That's perseverance. Because see, when we realize there's going to be times when we get knocked down and we realize that we have to maintain control of our emotions to actually get back up and go forward, and we realize that, quitting doesn't really ever get us anywhere, but then we realize, oh my gosh, I can actually rely on God's power. I'm telling you, things begin to change. So I want you to think about, as you look at these buckets, I want you to think about, where are you on this? What are you navigating right now? What level of stuff? And are you going through it, or are you growing through it? And as you think about that, I want to get real transparent for a moment. I love stuff like this. I love, talking about adversity and grit. But this wasn't just a message that I constructed. This has actually been a part of my journey. This is actually what I've been living for the better part of a year. In fact, if you've been around here for any length of time, you've heard me say at different times, like, this has been one of the most challenging professional years I think I've ever had. And as a result of that, some of that's been, just coming out of the pandemic. It's been navigating refinance challenges that we've been working on here, and just things you're just like, man, there's got to be solutions in here. And I'm, to be honest, there's times where I felt knocked down. I mean, over and over and over again. And if I'm honest, there's days where, and you probably feel this way at times, you just feel like, I just can't see the solution. I mean, it'd be easier to throw in the towel. And yet I realize that my job as a leader is not only to find a solution, but my bigger job is not give up. My bigger job is, when we do all we can to find the solution, to say, okay, we're gonna not give up. We're gonna get back up and keep going. And I just want you to know, man, I'm super encouraged. I mean, as some of you that have been on that journey, and I just want you to know, God has some really cool things in the works and a future for us, and I can't wait for that to unfold and for you to hear more about that. But I want you to know that, it's a journey getting there. And man, sometimes our job is to just say, I'm fighting for this, and I'm going to get knocked down, but my job is to get back up. And in the midst of that, that's where God does his greatest work. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know. I'm sure it's difficult. I'm sure it's unique. You feel like you may be alone in it. But I want you to know, man, you can fight the fight. And there's going to be opposition. Because you're a human, you're going to want to quit. All right, but you can choose not to quit. You can choose to finish. I mean, everybody starts, but there's only a few that actually finish. And so, I want you to ask the question, do I want to experience more of the things that God has for me? Because you got to decide. I mean, when the opposition hits, when you get knocked down, and it's going to happen, all right? You don't have a choice when the opposition comes. What you do get to choose is whether or not you quit. In fact, I want to give you one more encouragement from Paul. He says, do not become weary in doing good, because at the proper time, you will reap a harvest. And here's the promise, if you do not give up. I don't know where that lands for you, but man, I hope you lean into that this week. In fact, one last thing before I pray. Saw one of these guys I follow, a motivational speaker, chalk artist guy that I've kind of followed over the years. He's an artist. He said, you are the greatest project you will ever work on. So restart, reset, refocus, do it as many times as you need, but just don't give up. Don't give up. That's what the fall guy teaches. That's what Paul teaches us. I think that's what God wants to encourage us in as we go into this week. So let's go ahead and stand. I want to pray for us, and then we're going to sing one more song. God, thank you for this story. Thank you for the fall guy. Thank you for these pictures of resilience. And it's crazy because we say this all the time in this series. We see these character traits in these actors in these movies, and we're drawn to it because it actually reflects your very character. These are things that are reflected in your identity. They're things we long for, that we want, that we need, that we want to experience. And so, God, I just pray that you help us to not give up. Whatever challenge we're in the midst of right now, whatever thing keeps knocking us down, and we're wondering if we, have it in us to get back up, help us to realize that we can actually rely on you. In fact, that's the place where we experience most intimacy with you, and we experience your power. And so, God, I just pray that would happen this week. God, for some of us, this might actually start with us just beginning to walk with you. Maybe saying for the first time, I want to give my life to you. And if that's you, if you're saying, I want to know that kind of power and that kind of spirit in my life, you can take that step to, take advantage of Jesus' grace right now. Just tell him, man, God, I've kind of tried to do it my way, and I've missed the mark on some things, and I don't even know how I'm going to do it perfectly, but God, I'm turning to you right now. Will you be my leader? Father, will you be my leader? Jesus, will you be my leader? Will you be my Savior? And so I just pray, Father, for any of us that are praying that prayer for the first time or reaffirming that prayer, that you would build us up, that you would receive us as we receive you. That you build our confidence. Help us to see that we can get up when we're knocked down. That same power can be at work in us. So I just pray you encourage us right now, inspire us, help us to breathe this in, and to see that God, you actually can help us get up and walk into new spaces. So I just pray that you'd encourage us as we sing this, God.
In the dark and all alone, growing comfortable. Are you too scared to move and walk out of this tomb? Buried underneath the lies that you believed, safe and sound, stuck in the ground, too lost to be found. You're just asleep, and it's time to leave. Come on, rise up, take a breath, you're alive now. Can't you hear the voice of Jesus calling us out from the grave like Lazarus? You're brand new, power of death couldn't hold you. Can't you hear the voice of Jesus calling us out from the grave like Lazarus? Rise up, rise up, out from the grave like Lazarus. When you said your name, the thing that filled your veins was more than blood. It's kind of love that washes sin away. Now the door is open wide, the stone's been rolled aside. The old is gone, the light has come. So come on and rise up, take a breath, you're alive now. Can't you hear the voice of Jesus calling us out from the grave like Lazarus? You're brand new, power of death couldn't hold you. Can't you hear the voice
as you go into this week, be encouraged. God is here to help you get back up when you get knocked down and when life knocks you down. Now, if you made that choice today to take advantage of the grace Jesus brings to us by taking a step to trust him as your Lord and Savior, we'd love to celebrate that with you. So let us know on your connection card. And if you'd like someone to pray with you this week, perhaps you've got something going on you're struggling with, or just need some encouragement, text the word "need prayer" to 317-834-7373, and our prayer team will be in touch with you today. In case you've ever wondered, Crosspoint is completely donor funded, and that means every amount of money that you give helps spread this message we've heard today and helps people understand Jesus and experience more and more of the goodness he can bring to their lives, your lives, and our world. So if you're a giver here at Crosspoint, we want to say thank you for your generosity to the Joy Box. And if you're not a giver and you'd like to become one, you can donate at this QR code or through the Give button. Great to see you today. Have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you next time as we take a look at the movie Twisters and how to deal with the fear in our lives right here at the movies at Crosspoint.
Come on and ride.